think we're ready to begin. Information technology is in the business of controlling electrons. At a basic level, we do that with a transistor. Think in terms of ones and zeros, 5 volts or 0 volts. When we apply 5 volts to the base, it turns on like a switch so that current flows, electrons flow from the collector through the emitter. It's a pretty basic concept. We can build on that by putting it in a simple circuit. In a simple circuit, we control the circuit with a switch on the left. So where it says in, if we actuate that switch, then we can apply 5 volts to the base of Q1, which then lets electrons flow down through D1, turning on that diode. So the way that we interact with this solution is by actuating a switch. The feedback, the way the solution talks to us, is through that diode, through a light. We can build on these concepts by adding another transistor, adding a couple of more discrete components like resistors, and get what we have here is an AND gate. So we're talking ones and zeros, Boolean logic. We can actuate S1 and S2, and when we do, we get a 1 out of the out. If we don't switch one of the switches, then we're going to constantly get a low or a 0 on the output. So this is an AND gate. Oh, I went the wrong way. This is an AND gate. We're starting to get a little bit of complexity. We now have, 3 resistors, a couple of transistors, a couple of switches. So now we start to have a little complexity, and we can come out of that complexity by going up in one level of abstraction into another symbol, and this is the symbol for an AND gate. With a couple of different configurations, we can get other kinds of gates. Now, this isn't all of them, but we have an exclusive OR gate, we have a NOR gate, we have an inverter. So we have a couple of different ones. As we start to construct these pieces, we can start to come up with different kinds of circuits. For example, an adder. This is a half adder. It just deals, this is a full adder. So this has a carry. That Cn is the carry. So in Boolean mathematics, as we start to add more ones and zeros, they have to get added on. In the same way that when we add, we have that carry. And that carry is then going to go out on the C out and would likely go into the C in on another adder. So we can now do mathematics with Boolean logic. We also have things like latches. Latches, because of these two feedback loops, allow us just to have memory. This is the fundamentals of how memory works, computer memory, naturally. So with things like an adder, a latch, we can build counters, we can build flip-flops. These are the basic components of a CPU. All of the things you see here, tri-state buffers, registers, the ALU, all of these things are built with the fundamental concepts of adders, flip-flops, and latches. The way that we would interact with a CPU is obviously a little bit closer to what we're used to. A keypad, a keyboard, right? And the way that it's going to communicate back to us is, for example, through a 7-segment display. We can add more microprocessors, more CPUs to get video cards. At every level of these abstractions, from the simple discrete transistor all the way up through the CPU to multiple CPUs interacting, what you see is different levels of abstraction. These levels of abstractions fundamentally change the way that we interact with the solution, and more importantly, how the solution responds back to us, communicates with us. It's a two-way communication. Obviously, there's a couple of things to take away from this example, right? The levels of abstraction. The fact that when it first started out, we did only have a transistor. We had a transistor way before we had a CPU, right? And so obviously we're on a journey as well. And as we consider the journey, and when we consider these levels of abstraction, we can start to think about how the trends are going to go. So what I want to do for the next bit of time that we have together is I want to consider some of the important trends that we're seeing in today's technology to bring the technology to the field, right? To bring it to the front line. What does that mean? These themes, there's a lot of the themes. There's a lot of themes around modern applications. Now, one of my real passions is the web. I won't be talking about the web today, but you can take almost everything that the concepts that we're talking about here and apply them to the web. It's also extremely fast changing, just like the things that we'll be talking about here. So some of the themes that we're going to revolve around today is the fact that we're trying to reduce noise. Obviously, there's a balance to be played. When we're thinking about how to build solutions, there's a balance. And this is a constantly ever-changing landscape, right? And so we're learning as we go. I think most of us would recognize that, right? I also want to talk about using the cloud, but using it as glue. Just in the same way that we had these AND gates and transistors as discrete components in and of their own that can then be built upon, that's the way we should be thinking about modern applications. So modern applications, think of smaller components that we're going to put together, and the cloud's going to be the glue. We'll talk more about that. One of the things that I find the most exciting is the bridging that we're seeing between our physical world and our digital world. It's becoming real, right? The theme of today. It's becoming very real. And then another thing that I've been noticing a lot about is direct interaction through the UI, through the user experience. And so hopefully I'll be able to show a number of experiences, a number of things that we've built that'll highlight these things. So let's get started. So reducing the noise, to me that means two things. It means that we have ultra-focused apps. We're not building apps. A modern app is not an app that's trying to boil the ocean. It's not an app that's trying to do everything the business needs. It's silly, right? And if you're doing that, I would strongly encourage you to try not to. Think about how the app can be broken up into pieces and then how they come together. In software engineering, we have a term called loosely coupled with high cohesion, right? We want to build components at all levels of the solution that are very loosely coupled, that don't have a lot of dependencies, but when put together are highly cohesive. And we'll come back to that idea. The other thing that we're seeing is in the UI of the applications, we're getting rid of all the chrome. We're getting rid of all the noise. We're getting rid of all the things we really don't need. Do we need close buttons? I mean, for anyone that has seen Windows 8 applications, you can see that the solution has all of the canvas. It has all of the screen real estate, and I think that's really important. But even what's more important is it's not really using it all. We're putting a high price on white space and on not overburdening. I think that one of the real values we have in modern applications is we have more of a design influence. Designers have a higher level of empathy than engineers do. I think we can all acknowledge and appreciate that, right? And because of their empathy, they realize that we only have capacity for a certain level of cognitive ability, right? And when you throw a bunch of chrome on the interface, then it hinders that streamlinedness. It's noise we're trying to get rid of. And so as the cloud is glue, another thing to think about is all of these loosely coupled pieces are going to be tied together with something, right? And so think about the cloud as the connective tissue, right? It's not just a place where the database is stored. That's not doing it justice. We're dealing with smaller applications with a high amount of focus, and we need something to tie them all together, to make them, so the sum outweigh the number of the parts, right? And a lot of times when we're thinking about mobile applications, which of course these modern applications are largely mobile, is we don't always assume connectivity. But I think we should assume connectivity because that's what helps the cloud glue it together. And granted, we have to assume sketchy connectivity, right? It's not always going to be what we want it to be, but there's ways around that. One of those ways is with an offline focus. But you have to be very intentional about that. If it's not good enough just to say, oh, that has to work offline. I love seeing the RFPs that come through that said, here's the requirements, and at the bottom it says, oh, and it has to work offline. Whoa, all stop. Hang on a second. That means a lot. Now, that's not to say it's all hard. It's not. Actually, a large part of offline strategy isn't that hard. But when you start talking about an application that has to be offline all day, and other people are going to be hitting the same back-end databases and the same back-end structures that this app is going to when it syncs, now we start to have some serious contention issues, right? And we have to think through how that's going to work. And those aren't easy challenges to solve. And they're also largely dependent on the business. So we have to be very intentional about the way that we think about offline. So let's have a look at a couple of apps. I was really fortunate enough to be able to work on these apps with the Dynamics AX team. I personally helped build approvals, but myself and some colleagues went and basically worked with the Dynamics team to help architect a bunch of these apps. I love the focus they put on these apps, and I think eventually they're talking about having about 8 of them. And so these are all highly focused applications. Let's look at a few. Here's Timesheets. And how many people have seen these? They're available in the Windows Store now. So if you have Windows 8, I see a number of hands going up. So some people have already seen these. For those that have seen this, did you use them in online mode? Could you use them in online mode? Anybody using them in online mode? Because I'm using it in demo mode. I'm not assuming any connectivity on the stage. I was warned. Anyone using it in online mode? No, not yet. You do have to front a service interface in order to do that, and the AX teams put out a wonderful white paper on how to go about doing that of course, we're adhering to. So we have a nice user experience here. You can hold on these and get some information from touch. We can also just have it scroll over. This app only does timesheets. That's it. All the different statuses of those timesheets, but that's all it does is timesheets. When you build a highly focused app, it allows you to build the user experience around that focus. This was not an off-the-shelf control, I can assure you. I know the guy who built this control in particular, and it was built completely from scratch for this reason. And to my knowledge, is the only place it's being used. But it talks to a number of things, right? Direct interaction. We're working right where it is. Right where we need to is the plus sign. Now, granted, there is an app bar for adding time, but to me, it makes a lot more sense just to tap it here. It's not a jarring experience. It just slides in from the right. We keep our context within the app, and we can just do what we need to here. So this is a really nice user experience that's structured and focused directly on this space. We can look at expenses. Same idea. It's only expense reports. And there are some nice user experience pieces in here as well. For example, there's a calendar control in here. Again, completely custom. And it's nice because it snaps to the beginning of the work week, right? So this, again, completely custom, completely from scratch. But I think this was the only control within the whole application that's completely custom. So it's not like every control has to be custom. Everything else was pretty standard. But it's a nice user experience. Keeps the context, keeps everything right here. Doesn't jump you to a new page when it doesn't really have to. So there's some really good user experience in this one as well. And approvals, my favorite. But we can see the same thing, right? It gives you the information you need in the beginning. It looks nice, right? I mean, 10 years ago, nobody would have thought that when the app launches, 75% of the screen needs to be taken up with colored pencils, right? Nobody would have appreciated that 10 years ago. But it's nice. It's actually nice to use it. Now, there's been talk in the future about having some kind of dismiss button on here so that after you've been using the app for a year, maybe the colored pencils aren't so exciting anymore. Or there's a library of images in the back, and every time you fire it up, you get a different image. That's a little bit more interesting, right? So they're trying to be practical as well. It's not just we've let the designers run the engineering team. It's not going quite that far yet. But it supports Windows 8 gestures, and we can see different things. It has nice controls. We can approve it from here. Oh, I didn't show. You can also, if you're expecting these expense reports to come in, you can just select several and approve them that way, right? So it's a bit pragmatic as well. Some really nice integration with reports. So in this invoice proposal, it launches the document right in the app. You don't lose context, and the app just snaps to the left. Once you're finished, you can just snap it back. So there's some nice UI in here. And for timesheets, if there's more comments. There's a time summary. So this is obviously geared toward the person that's going to be approving these expense reports, invoice proposals, and so forth, and project impact. So some nice apps. And what I really like about these is they're completely offline, or they work completely offline. I wanted to tell the story. I was excited to show these because I was going to give you some inside information on these apps. I was going to say that when these apps were first put in the store, there was not an online mode. It was only demo mode. But what you didn't realize when you first installed these, when they first hit the Windows Store, is all of the code to talk to the back end, all of the caching code was already in it. They just had it hidden. And I thought, oh, they'll appreciate some inside info. Not realizing that they have already put, updates into the store that now support online mode. But yeah, so it's pretty fun. So let's get back to here. Showcase is an application that Intergen's been building for field sales, but it does a whole lot more than field sales. It allows us to communicate the types of apps and the types of experiences that we've been building, not just Windows 8 apps, but CRM implementation, AX implementations. Most of the Intergenites in the room right now are going, yeah, if I could actually get my hands on it, because we actually haven't deployed it yet. But I assure you, we're within days. All of the data has been published, and it's just a matter of installing Windows 8.1 because it requires 8.1. But I'll show you a quick peek of that. So this basically allows us, and now I'm running the offline mode, so it's about 150 meg of all of the content, all of the demo scripts, all of the Word documents, all of the screenshots. But it allows us to look at the work we've done according to the vector that makes the most sense for the discussion you're having, right? So if you're having a discussion around retail, well, then you can go in and see the work that we've done in the retail segment, right? We can see the ones that are the latest, the ones where we've done some other ones we've done, and we can see it by vertical, by scenario. If we've done I believe, if I go into here, I can see the complete set. The complete set is if we've built a bunch of these apps that all go together, meaning these are all discrete applications that are all held together with cloud glue, then we can see all of the apps that are held together. And all of these healthcare apps, and I'll be showing you some of them, are all held together with the same Azure backend, right? So this is actually going to be we're really looking forward to getting this into the hands of everyone who wants to use it, because it's a pretty compelling piece of work. To my favorite part, right? When we have these devices, the Surface, the tablets, the phones, they have a wide array of ways that we can communicate to the solution with a much higher level of fidelity than just pushing a button, right? Or even pushing keys on a keyboard. And actually what we've seen is that it's almost pushing the keyboard out of the way, right? Using a keyboard on this device when I don't have the actual keyboard plugged in is actually more difficult than using its sensors and using touch and using the other facilities that are available. So we love sensors. We love cameras. We love location services. And I mean, really, what would this list be without short range, frequency hopping? Oh, I knew I was going to forget this acronym. Chris made me add this, by the way. Frequency hopping, spectrum spanning radio. I should have left it out. What does it mean? It's effectively the fundamental technology, and I do actually like this one. I just didn't know that this was the area that it's in. But it's effectively RFID, NFC, shortwave radio, and those types of things. But it's close proximity detection, is really what it is, right? But it can obviously do frequency hopping, so when a frequency is not available, right? So what this is doing is it's really upping the ante in the way that we communicate with the solutions, way beyond touch, way beyond, so we're using cameras, we're using NFC, and I can show a few things. While this device doesn't have some of the things built in, I do have a number of things that we can use to communicate with it. The real way to be thinking about this as a solution, and we'll look at some healthcare and some retail scenarios, but the real way to think about this is some of these devices, as Chris mentioned when he was on stage earlier this morning, it was that there's other devices that this can slide into, right? There's other things that rather than hooking up a USB hub to it, the device can actually slide into it. There's a device that was at the Worldwide Partner Conference that was a sleeve that had a barcode scanner here and had a mag stripe reader on the side, and the tablet slid into it. And of course, the sleeve also had a battery in it. So it was a really compelling retail device. And the other thing that I think is important is we want to be able to focus directly on what it is we're doing. You saw it in the Timesheet app. There's a plus button right there, right where I want to add the time. I'm going to click that, and then my time's going to show up right there on that date. That's getting away from icons. That's getting away from menus and other things, right? So we want to try, when you're thinking about user interfaces, our designers are thinking about trying to put the functionality as close to where you would expect it, where you would want it, right there. So let's have a look at some examples. This first one is a concept that we put together around a retail digital sign. So we're not just doing consumer applications. We're not just doing business applications, but we can be thinking about where to put these experiences, where the customers are, where they're going to get used. And so one of the options was a digital sign. And then this other app that we'll see with the management app is where we can see that cloud glue working, how we can see the inputs of all of those other apps coming into. So let's have a look at the digital sign first. So I'm running it obviously in landscape mode. This could be run on a device even this big, right? But it's just in screensaver mode. I don't have a proximity sensor hooked up to it, but you can imagine a really small proximity sensor right above that can detect either faces. We actually have facial recognition in the app, so when we do have a camera on it, it can use the camera. As soon as it detects a face, it jumps out of screensaver mode and goes right to the main screen. We're going to be putting a Connect onto it so it can sense motion, and when there's motion and the motion stops in front of it, then we know that we can disengage the screensaver and show them something. So I'll just get past this. What's interesting about this one in particular is that there's no concept of a user or a customer. A customer is just browsing the site. So we're gonna add a TV to our cart. We're gonna go back and we can put a camera in our cart. This one looks good, maybe that color. Add that to our wish list. So it's not going in a cart. I said cart, I meant wish list. So this is just adding things to a wish list. We have another application on a phone that would be installed by the consumer, and that does know who that consumer is and can communicate to the cloud. So if they could have probably done this on their phone, added the wish list, but they're standing in front of the digital sign. Now they need to get their items on the wish list without user context associated with their account. So we can click on the items. These are the items in our wish list. And this QR code that's on the screen right now contains the product IDs of the two items in our wish list. So if they scan this with their phone app, the phone app will be able to add those items specifically to their cart because it's the phone app that's making the connection to their customer account, right? So we have things that are not customer-centric, and we have things that are customer-centric, and we can use things like NFC, like QR codes, to be able to associate those two, right? Now, we also have a digital sign or we have a kiosk that customers can log into, and then they can add things to their cart and check out later. We also have a point-of-sale application that allows them to check out if there was a mobile salesperson. We'll look at one of those scenarios in a moment. And the management app. So There's a couple of interesting things about this. Obviously, it has a very kind of portal feel to it. It gives KPIs. We can kind of, they're not extremely interactive, but they're a little interactive. We can do some things with these, with the charts, diagrams. But I think one of the more interesting things is imagine having sensors in the floors throughout different key parts of the retail store so that we have some general sense of where the traffic is. Imagine some sensors at the doors so that we can detect motion going in and out of the store. Those things mean that we have a general sense of how many people are in the store at any given time. And if we put some placemats with sensors in them around where the cashiers are, for example, each of these numbers represent an area where customers can check out, then we have some sense of how busy that area is. So if you look at the one in home appliances, one here, did you see where I was touching? Right here? Yeah, right there. So that's indicating that so I should get this back. So if you look in the top right, it gives a general sense of how busy that area is and how many cash registers are open there. So we can then go and say, oh, how about this one over here next to the exits, because that's where most of our registers are, the one where we have 8. We need more registers open there. So right now we have 8 registers open, but there's more business going on there. So in other words, there's a queue lining up. So we can then increase. So if you watch it to go 10 to 11, 11 is indicating that if we can open up a few more registers, then we'll be able to extinguish those queues, right? And we can do that with some intelligence. You can imagine that when we do get in a situation where we have 8 registers open and we need more registers open, that a notification goes off and actually notifies someone's phone application or tablet application that we have a queue. Maybe they're doing stock in the back and they weren't aware that there was a queue. So I think this is a compelling piece of technology. And you also saw that I tapped directly on the cash register area. How about another one where we want to influence the environmental controls. We want to increase the temperature or decrease the temperature, increase the air circulation in a particular area. We just have 4 of these main controller areas. We can tap directly on them and get kind of a specialized control. Now this is a little interesting. It's not completely intuitive in the beginning, but if you'll notice, the 2 top sliders influence lumens, so the lights, both the electric lights, like we have here, and skylights. The 2 bottom ones influence temperature, so the HVAC system and vents. The 2 items on the left, skylights and vents, don't cost as much energy, right? They're more sustainable. They're better, right? They cost less. Electric lights and HVAC systems cost more. Well, we have this little sustainability indicator in the middle with the leaf. So if I go up on lights, I go down on the green. If I go down on the lights and up on the skylights, we can get a better sustainability indicator, if you will, right? And same with vents. If I use less vents, that means I'm going to end up using more HVAC, less HVAC, more vents, and that's better, right? And you can see the direct influence of those controls as we're controlling them, right? So I think that's nice because we can then choose the different area directly. We're directly interacting with the thing that we want to control. Let's look at some other examples of that. I want to make sure I'm on track, so let's go back to here. Yeah, let's have a look at a healthcare kiosk. So the scenario here is that we have a patient and they need to go check in. They've gone to registration and they've gotten their wristband. I'm going to use this. It's an NFC device. So in their wristband, we've put their identification on there. Now they need to go over to the kiosk and finish checking in before they go to their appointment. We can also show the pharmacy, how they check out of the pharmacy. The pharmacist has a barcode scanner. Oh, I forgot my barcodes. I might not get to that anyway. I only have 10 minutes left. And then there's also a patient tablet, which I think also has an important piece. So let's have a look at some of these. First, we'll look at the kiosk very quickly. That's not the right kiosk. I meant the healthcare kiosk, the patient kiosk. So let's sign out and start like we're supposed to. So here we're going to log in. We have I need to actually plug in, don't I? I'll plug my USB hub in, the barcode scanner. And I have this NFC device here. Oh, and I obviously put the NFC close enough to it. I think I should have plugged that in before I fired the app up. There we go. Now, this is a patient, so they would have also had a PIN because you don't want, we're dealing with medical information, right? And you can't just have, if someone gets a hold of someone's wristband, you don't want them to be able to authenticate with it. So we have two-factor authentication. And so we'll type in the patient's PIN. And this is just going to let them check in, right? So we can check in, we can see that Sanjay's information, he can update it as he needs to. He can talk about his present conditions, and if he chooses one, then we can type in some information. We can also specify our path. We've all had to fill these out, right, when we go to the doctor's office. Well, we can also do this at a kiosk so that we're not having to worry about all the paper, and they have it immediately in the system before the patient even shows up at their appointment. Now, we can see here that Sanjay has 24 minutes until his appointment. It's going to go ahead and show him where the appointment is located based on his current position. And it also says, well, you have 25 minutes and you have to walk past the cafeteria. So we'll give you a free coffee if you'll just touch your armband to the NFC. If you keep your eye on the bottom right, we can see that the coffee was loaded onto his armband. So, and Sanjay's obviously not going for a heart condition, so coffee is appropriate. Our inpatient scenario is there for cardiac help. We don't offer him coffee. And so that's showing you that it's more than just, it's the physical. How would you do this? I mean, one, you could say that, yeah, it's good with the customer interaction, but the patient's already interacted with the receptionist, already has his armband, already established his PIN, and so now it's just a matter of going through the motions until he gets to his appointment. Let's have a look at probably can't do the pharmacy. Let's do the patient tablet. And, I might need to log in as I think this is the outpatient. We might need to log in as the inpatient. Well, let's have a look at this one first. So we can see, in this scenario, this is an outpatient. Sanjay, he went to his appointment in immunology. They have to run some tests. He needs to stick around for a few hours. So they've given him a tablet that he can then use while he's waiting for his test results, which could be a couple of hours. So he thinks, well, I'll just go ahead and watch a movie. So there's some movies in here. Haven't seen Karate Kid for a while. So we can go in here, and if I take my card, I might need to put this down because it's very realistic. Sometimes it doesn't work. Nope, red light. Flip it around. There we go. Then I don't know if Sanjay would be given a digital PIN, but I can sign and purchase, right? And then the movie would load, right? So let's log out of Sanjay. Whoops. Let's log out of Sanjay and log in as the inpatient. Because we've talked a little bit about being able to directly change, directly interact with these pieces. So Robert's in for a cardiac surgery, right? And he's in the bed. There's been studies have shown, and I was reading studies that were at least 3 years old, what they're trying to do in medical facilities, and you can imagine they'd be doing this across all customer interactions, is they're empowering the user, they're empowering the patient. The patients have a much better time when they're confined to a bed, when they have more control. So in addition to being able to watch movies and to do things for themselves, we can also allow them to control their lights in their room directly from their bed. We can allow them to change the blinds on the other side of the room. And so in terms of being able to directly interact with that, we can choose a light. We can bring the blinds down. The blinds are coming down. Change the angle of the blinds, right? And do all of that right from the bed, right? So you can imagine that these sensors and these servo motors are just equipped throughout the patient room. And yeah. The last scenario is a Fabricam, like Contoso, worldwide, massive company, zero revenue. I don't know how they stay in business. But so we have the scenario where the customer's inside the brick and mortar store. They're using Fabricam's consumer phone app and NFC tagging furniture that they're interested in. They just beep, beep, and it's adding it to their cart and adding it to their wish list. Then they look up on the wall and they said, if you need help, just tap your phone here, right? And that will summon a salesperson to come help you. We've probably seen these before. You push a button or and the buzzer rings somewhere and someone knows to come to you. But it can be a little bit, the interaction can be a little bit deeper if we know more about that person. So let's have a look. Oh, and then the home installation. We'll also briefly look at what that might look like when someone's ready to come to their house and show them what it looks like before the furniture arrives. So let's have a look quickly at sales. And so I'm already, that's not where I wanted to be. So if we're here, we can imagine that we've just beeped the door. Customer needs assistance, and so while I'm on my way to the customer, I'm having a look at, well, that's where they are in the store, because that's where they hit the thing on the side of the wall. This is what's in their cart, so I can see immediately what they're into. And so let's go to the room planner. We've arrived up to the customer to have a look at, can we make sure that all of this is actually going to fit? So the customer says, yeah, well, there's like a wall here. That's interesting. There's a wall there. There's a wall here. This is not supposed to look like this, actually. That's what a wall's supposed to look like. Let's try that again. So we have a wall here. We have another wall here. This wall goes somewhere here and looks something like that. The room looks something like that. And then there's probably a window here. And we're thinking that we're probably going to want to put the couch here, probably put the table here, and this chair here. Right? So now we can get a sense based on the dimensions of the room and where the furniture is that says, oh, that looks like it might work, and that's cool. So now this information gets saved, both back to their cart and to the person that's going to show up at their house to find out whether everything is going to fit and if the customer's happy with how that's going to look. So now we're at the customer's house, and we have their order. So we see the items that are in their cart. We can then go to the virtual floor plan and show the customer what the furniture is going to look like in the house. So if we go here to visualize room, hoping this is going to work. Yep. Okay. So now if we flip the tablet up, we should get the calibration. And if I can do this, say okay. Now, obviously, we don't have a room up on stage, and so we've had to put a bit of a backdrop around this. But you can see that we're using the compass inside the device to be able to look around the room and get this augmented reality feel. So let's have a look at what the furniture is going to look like in it. So here's the furniture. Well, it might look better if we move the couch to here, right? And it looks like everything's working, right? But it's the sensors in the device that are allowing us to kind of have this rich experience, and the customer to say, I don't know, that black doesn't really look so good. What if we put some art there? That's roughly the color scheme. It's looked at the room and established the color scheme of the room and said, okay, let's try this. No. That's not bad. No, let's go with this one, right? And so that allows us to, and it's detecting that we're holding it up like this, because when I put it down, it goes back to that, right? So there's some value, there's some real value in having these sensors and using the sensors in the device, because the way that I'm communicating with this app now is a lot richer than using a mouse, really even than using touch, and certainly more rich than using a keyboard. So what I really want you to take away from is the fact that we're on a journey. We certainly haven't arrived. I would say that we're just at the cusp, at the pinnacle of understanding what are all the different ways that we can communicate to the solutions that we're building, and what are the ways that those solutions can communicate back to us, right? We're going to undergo a lot of change. I mean, this was the premise of Case's talk this morning, his keynote, was that trying to adapt for picking the right technology that's going to last us decades is really kind of silly, right? It's a lot more valuable to try to adapt to change and to try to pick the technologies and the partners and the solutions that will allow us to be as flexible as possible. Clearly, to say that IT is in the business of controlling electrons, while there's certainly truth to that, it's also not very insightful, it's not very inspirational, it's not really that valuable. It's almost like saying, you're in business to make money. Well, yeah, sure. I mean, you are. There's certainly truth to that, but I'd like to think that we're all drawing from something that has a lot more sustainability, right? That's a bit more inspiring, that has a lot more meaning, right? And so hopefully this gave you some glimpse at what's possible. Thank you.